A lone figure approaches on horseback, his black duster catching the wind. Jed Snake Eyes Martinez rides tall in his saddle, a silver-plated revolver glinting at his hip. His gang of 12 riders fans out behind him, their horses' hooves breaking the afternoon silence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The townsfolk retreat indoors, mothers pulling children from wooden sidewalks, shopkeepers locking their doors. Only the chapel bell continues its steady toll, calling the faithful to evening prayer. The sound echoes through Redemption Springs, a constant reminder of changes that came with the new priest 6 months ago. The dusty main street empties quickly, save for a few nervous onlookers peering through grimy windows. Inside the modest church, Father Michael Sullivan kneels before the altar, his weathered hands clasped in prayer. The wooden rosary between his fingers has grown smooth from years of use, much like the calluses on his trigger finger that he pretends not to notice. A shaft of amber light pierces through the stained glass, casting colored shadows across his face. A face that carries more stories than any man of the cloth should. Deep lines around his eyes speak of sleepless nights, while a thin scar along his jaw hints at tales left untold. The sharp rapport of boots on wooden steps outside makes him pause mid-prayer, but he doesn't turn around. The floorboards creak under heavy footsteps, and the smell of tobacco and leather fills the sacred space. The evening breeze rustles through the chapel, making the candles flicker ominously. "Ain't proper to keep your hat on in church," Michael says quietly, still facing the altar. Behind him, Jed Martinez's spurs jingle as he steps into the chapel, his gang crowding the doorway. The men's shadows stretch long across the floor, like demons reaching for salvation. Their gun belts creak with each step, an unholy chorus in the sacred silence. "Heard tell there's a new priest in Redemption Springs," Martinez drawls, deliberately adjusting his hat lower instead of removing it. "Thought I'd come to pay my respects." His voice carries the hint of a smile, but his eyes remain cold as desert nights. The gold tooth in his mouth catches the light as he speaks, a trophy from a duel he won years ago. His reputation precedes him, tales of men who drew their last breath staring into those serpentine eyes. Michael rises slowly, his black cassock falling straight despite the evening wind that whips through the open door. He turns to face his visitors, and something in his calm blue eyes makes Martinez's smile fade slightly. There's a stillness about the priest that seems almost unnatural, like the quiet before a storm. His movements carry an effortless grace that seems at odds with his calling. "The evening service starts in 10 minutes, Michael says. "You're welcome to join us in prayer." His hands remain clasped before him, the rosary wrapped around his right wrist. The wooden beads click softly against each other, marking time like an executioner's countdown. Martinez spits on the floor, drawing nervous chuckles from his men. The tobacco juice stains the worn wood near a pew. "Ain't here for prayers, Padre. Word is you've been helping people who don't want to be found." He steps closer, boot heels clicking against the wooden floorboards. "Including a certain señorita who used to work for me. My property, you might say." His hand rests casually on his gun belt, fingers drumming against the tooled leather. In the back room, Maria Ramirez freezes while arranging flowers for tomorrow's service. Her hands tremble, remembering how Father Michael had helped her younger sister escape to California just last week, away from Martinez's protection and his wandering hands. The white lilies she holds seem to wilt under the weight of her fear. "The church offers sanctuary to all who seek it," Michael responds, his voice level. "As I'm sure your mother taught you, Señor Martinez." His words carry no challenge, yet something in their delivery makes two of Martinez's men cross themselves reflexively. The air grows thick with tension, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Martinez's hand drops to his gun, fingers dancing across the silver-plated handle. Light glints off the intricate engravings that record his victories, each scroll and flourish representing a life taken. "My mother taught me to deal with those who take what's mine, even men of the cloth." He draws his revolver with practiced speed, the barrel catching the light from the stained glass windows. "Tomorrow at noon, Padre. Show up in the street or I burn this church to the ground with everyone in it." Michael's expression doesn't change, but those watching closely might notice how his right hand twitches slightly. Muscle memory from a past life, fighting to surface. The rosary beads click softly against each other, a sound like distant gunfire. "Violence won't solve anything, my son. Tomorrow. Noon." Martinez backs toward the door, gun still trained on Michael. "And Padre?" "Bring a weapon. I want this to be sporting." He grins, revealing that gold tooth again. "Though I doubt you've ever held anything more dangerous than that Bible." The setting sun casts his shadow long across the church floor, a dark harbinger of what's to come. After they leave, Maria rushes forward, her face pale with fear. The flowers she was arranging lie scattered across the floor, white petals strewn like cemetery blooms. "Father, you can't face him. He's killed 23 men in duels. They call him Snake Eyes because that's the last thing they see before they die," Michael finishes quietly. He walks to the altar and picks up his Bible, its leather cover worn smooth by years of devotion. A bookmark made from braided horsehair marks his place, a reminder of another life. "Maria, gather the town council, and send word to Isabella Hawthorne. Tell her." He pauses, something dark passing behind his eyes. "Tell her the ghost is about to return." As the chapel bell continues its mournful toll, Michael opens a hidden compartment beneath the altar. Inside lies a worn gun belt, the leather cracked but well-oiled. The holster cradles a Colt Peacemaker, its pearl handle yellowed with age. His fingers hover over it for a moment before he closes the compartment, but not before the fading light catches the initials carved into the grip, GW. The letters seem to pulse with untold stories. In the dying light, he whispers a prayer for forgiveness, for what he's done, and for what he's about to do. The last rays of sun through the stained glass paint his face in hues of blood and gold. Word of the impending duel spreads through Redemption Springs like wildfire. The Blackwood Brothers General Store becomes a hub of hushed conversations and worried glances. Luke Blackwood counts ammunition boxes while his brother Mark boards up their front window. They've seen enough of Martinez's duels to know what follows. The steady rhythm of hammer meeting nails echoes down the street like a funeral drum. A quick draw. Charlie Hayes leans against the store's counter, spinning tales to anyone who will listen. His spurs jingle with each shift of his weight, a nervous tick that betrays his own unease despite his bravado. Snake Eyes got his name in Tombstone, shot a man right between the eyes while rolling dice. He pauses for effect, tobacco juice staining his unkempt beard. Never even looked up from the game. Killed 3 more before sundown that same day. The gathered crowd hangs on his every word. Mothers clutching their shawls tight, ranch hands fingering their gun belts, and even Deputy Frank Miller, who should be out on patrol instead of trading gossip. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows through the dusty windows, painting everyone in shades of amber and dread. "I heard he killed a priest before," whispers Emma Blackwood, the younger sister who helps run the store's books. "Down in Mexico. Burned the whole mission to the ground after." "That ain't the half of it," Charlie continues, warming to his audience. "They say he made a deal with the devil himself. Traded his soul for speed with a gun. That's why his eyes look like they do. Like a rattler's just before it strikes." The saloon door swings open with enough force to rattle the bottles on their shelves, silencing the chatter. Isabella Hawthorne steps in, her medical bag clutched tight, authority radiating from every inch of her 5'6" frame. The lamplight catches the silver threading in her dark hair, earned from years of patching up this town's mistakes. Her eyes scan the room with clinical precision, years of battlefield medicine having taught her to spot trouble before it bleeds. "Where is he?" she demands, her voice carrying the kind of quiet power that makes even the drunkards at the back table sit up straight. The tension in the room thickens like smoke before a storm. "The church, Miss Bell," Charlie answers, tipping his hat. Something in her expression makes him swallow the rest of his story. "Ain't left since..." But she's already gone. her skirts sweeping dust from the wooden planks. The crowd parts as she strides toward the chapel, memories of another time, another place, burning in her mind. Her boots click against the boardwalk with military precision, a reminder of her days as a field surgeon during the war, when she learned that bullets don't discriminate between saints and sinners. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside the church, Father Michael stands at the window watching the sun sink behind distant mesas. The hidden compartment beneath the altar lies open, its contents spread across a ceremonial cloth. Gun oil, cleaning rods, and the peacemaker that hasn't seen daylight in 5 years. Each item rests in its own place, arranged with the same care he usually reserves for communion vessels. "I should have known you'd come," he says without turning, his reflection in the window pane overlaying the cross on the far wall. "You always could smell trouble brewing." Isabella sets her bag down heavily on a pew, the sound echoing through the empty church like a judge's gavel. "You swore an oath, Michael, to God and to me. On John's grave you swore it." Her voice carries the weight of shared secrets and old wounds. "I swore to protect the innocent first." His fingers trace the inscription on the pearl grip, worn smooth by years of use and hidden prayers. "GW, the ghost of Wyoming," feels like another life. He turns the gun over, moonlight catching the notches carved into the wooden grip, each mark a soul sent to judgment. It was another life. She moves closer, her skirts rustling against the wooden floor like whispered confessions. "I didn't spend 3 months pulling bullets out of you just to watch you throw it all away. Remember the fever? How did you call out names in your sleep? Names of men you'd killed?" Michael turns, and for a moment Isabella sees past the priest's collar to the man she'd found bleeding in her clinic all those years ago. The shadows under his eyes are deeper now, but that same fire burns behind them. Martinez will kill them all, Belle. The whole town. You know his kind. Men who mistake mercy for weakness, who see kindness as an invitation to cruelty. And I know yours. She reaches for the gun but stops short, her hand trembling slightly. 7 states had a price on your head. The Ghost, fastest gun west of the Mississippi, until ... She leaves the sentence hanging, like a noose waiting for its prisoner. Until Reverend Pierce found me dying in that canyon. Michael's hand unconsciously touches the scar on his chest, a star-shaped reminder of his past. He showed me another way, a better way. Said even a ghost could find peace in God's house. The chapel bell tolls, marking the hour, 8 chimes until noon tomorrow. Each ring seems to echo through the empty church like Judgment Day's trumpet. "The town council's meeting at the Blackwoods," Isabella says, adjusting her medical bag. "Sheriff Wilson's there, says he can stop this." The skepticism in her voice matches the weariness in her eyes. Michael's laugh is hollow, bouncing off the chapel walls like a stray bullet. "Tom Wilson couldn't stop a drunk from stealing his own horse last week. No, this ends between me and Martinez. Always has been heading this way since the moment I put on this collar." "Then God help us all." Isabella turns to leave but pauses at the door, her silhouette framed by the dying light. "The last time you picked up that gun, Michael, it wasn't just bodies I had to bury. Remember that. Some ghosts don't rest easy no matter how many prayers you say over them." As her footsteps fade into the gathering dusk, Michael lifts the peacemaker. The weight feels familiar, too familiar. In the polished pearl grip, he catches his reflection. Not the ghost of Wyoming, not yet Father Sullivan. Just a man trying to walk the line between 2 worlds, with hell on one side and heaven watching from above. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying dust and whispering prayers across Redemption Springs. Tomorrow, when the sun reaches its peak, the town will learn which man arrives at the church. The priest seeking salvation, or the ghost seeking vengeance. The cross atop the steeple casts its shadow across the street like the hand of God himself, marking the spot where blood will soon stain the dust. The Blackwood Brothers' store-back room buzzes with tension as Redemption Springs' most prominent citizens gather around the oak table. Kerosene lamps cast flickering shadows on the walls, their light catching the worry lines etched deep in weathered faces. Sheriff Tom Wilson paces the creaking floorboards, his badge catching lamplight with each turn. The town council, mostly merchants and ranchers who've built their lives in this desert outpost, watch him with growing unease. Martinez ain't just some common outlaw, Wilson says, adjusting his gun belt for the third time. His fingers drum nervously against the worn leather holster. He's got connections. Mexican territories, New Mexico, even up in Colorado. We stand against him. We're asking for war. His gang's already 50 strong, and that's not counting the hired guns who'd ride with him for a share of the spoils. Luke Blackwood slams his fist on the table, making the oil lamp flicker and dance. The shadows leap across the room like startled deer. So we just let him burn down our church? Watch him gun down a priest in cold blood? His brother Mark places a calming hand on his shoulder, but Luke shrugs it off, years of bottled rage finally finding voice. I was there when he took over Silver Creek. Watched good men die because nobody had the spine to stand up to him. Women and children fled into the desert that night. Some never made it out. Deputy Frank Miller, young enough that his badge still shines like a new penny, clears his throat. His hand unconsciously touches the revolver he's only fired in practice. What about the territorial marshal? Could send a wire. Nearest marshal's 3 days' ride. Wilson cuts him off, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. This ends tomorrow at noon, one way or another. And we all know what Martinez does to towns that dare to ask for help. The door opens with a groan of tired hinges, bringing a gust of cool night air and Isabella Hawthorne. The scent of medicine and gunpowder clings to her skirts. She's been tending to someone's wounds again. She surveys the room, noting the empty whiskey glasses and worried faces, reading stories of fear in every averted glance. I've just come from the church, she announces, removing her shawl with precise movements. Father Sullivan won't back down. Not this time. A murmur ripples through the gathering like wind through prairie grass. Old Joe Murphy, who runs the livery stable, crosses himself with gnarled fingers. Lord have mercy. Martinez, I'll kill him sure as sunrise. Saw him shoot a man in El Paso once. A bullet went right through his Bible and into his heart. Maybe not. All heads turn to quick draw Charlie Hayes, who's been lurking in the corner like a guilty conscience. He steps forward, spurs jingling a devil's tune. Been watching the Padre these past months. Way he moves, way he carries himself. That ain't no ordinary priest. Man's got history written in his bones. Isabella's eyes flash a warning, sharp as surgical steel. But Charlie continues, warming to his tale. I saw him break up that fight at the saloon last month. 3 miners, drunk as skunks, swinging chairs and bottles. Padre had him on the ground before anyone could blink. Moves like a man who's danced with death before. And the scars on his hands ain't from prayer beads. What exactly are you suggesting? Wilson demands, though something in his expression suggests he's had similar thoughts. The room grows still, even the crickets outside seeming to lean in to listen. I'm suggesting, Charlie drawls, rolling a cigarette with practiced ease, that maybe Snake Eyes is about to bite off more than he can swallow. Seen my share of gunmen, but there's something about the Padre that makes my trigger finger itch. The room falls silent as Isabella steps forward, her skirts whispering against the rough wooden floor. I've known Father Michael longer than anyone here. He came to us seeking redemption, and Reverend Pierce gave him sanctuary. The man he was... She pauses, choosing her words carefully, like picking bullets from a wound. That man died in the desert. The person who wears that collar now is a servant of God. Then God better make him quick on the draw, Luke mutters, earning scattered nervous laughter that dies as quickly as it rises. Sheriff Wilson's deputy shifts uncomfortably in his chair, the wood creaking a protest. There's something else. Rumors from up north. 5 years ago, right before Father Sullivan arrived. He glances at Isabella, who's gone pale as a desert moon. They say the ghost of Wyoming disappeared around that time, just vanished into thin air. Some say he died, others say he found religion. Man had a price on his head that could buy half the territory. Enough. Isabella's voice cracks like a whip in the close air. We're not here to trade ghost stories. There are lives at stake. Real lives, not legends. Her hands tremble slightly as she grips the back of a chair. Sheriff Wilson rubs his temples, years of compromise and hard choices etched in every gesture. Bell's right. Martinez gave us till noon. We need a decision. He looks around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. All in favor of evacuating the town? Raise your hands. Not a single hand rises. Mark Blackwood speaks up, his quiet voice carrying steel forged in years of frontier hardship. This is our home. We've built something here. Schools, farms, families. If we run now, we'll never stop running. Some things are worth dying for. The sheriff nods slowly, resignation and resolve warring in his expression. Then we fight. He turns to his deputy. Frank, get every able man armed and ready. Luke, Mark, your store has rifles. Distribute them to anyone who can shoot straight. His voice drops to a near whisper. If Martinez wants a war, we'll give him one. The room falls silent as Isabella steps forward, her skirts whispering against the rough wooden floor. I've known Father Michael longer than anyone here. He came to us seeking redemption, and Reverend Pierce gave him sanctuary. The man he was... She pauses, choosing her words carefully, like picking bullets from a wound. That man died in the desert. The person who wears that collar now is a servant of God. Then God better make him quick on the draw, Luke mutters, earning scattered nervous laughter that dies as quickly as it rises. Sheriff Wilson's deputy shifts uncomfortably in his chair, the wood creaking a protest. There's something else. Rumors from up north. 5 years ago, right before Father Sullivan arrived. He glances at Isabella, who's gone pale as a desert moon. They say the ghost of Wyoming disappeared around that time, just vanished into thin air. Some say he died, others say he found religion. Man had a price on his head that could buy half the territory. Enough. Isabella's voice cracks like a whip in the close air. We're not here to trade ghost stories. There are lives at stake. Real lives, not legends. Her hands tremble slightly as she grips the back of a chair. Sheriff Wilson rubs his temples, years of compromise and hard choices etched in every gesture. Bell's right. Martinez gave us till noon. We need a decision. He looks around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. All in favor of evacuating the town? Raise your hands. Not a single hand rises. Mark Blackwood speaks up, his quiet voice carrying steel forged in years of frontier hardship. This is our home. We've built something here. Schools, farms, families. If we run now, we'll never stop running. Some things are worth dying for. The sheriff nods slowly, resignation and resolve warring in his expression. Then we fight. He turns to his deputy. Frank, get every able man armed and ready. Luke, Mark, your store has rifles. Distribute them to anyone who can shoot straight. His voice drops to a near whisper. If Martinez wants a war, we'll give him one. No. Isabella's word cuts through the rising excitement like a surgeon's knife. That's exactly what he wants, an excuse to burn this town to the ground. One priest breaking his oath is a tragedy, a town in open rebellion. She shakes her head, silver threads in her hair catching the lamplight. He'll bring an army next time, and there won't be enough of us left to bury the dead. The truth of her words settles over the room like desert dust. Outside, a lone coyote howls at the rising moon, its cry mixing with the distant sound of the chapel bell. 9 hours until noon. Wilson holsters his gun with finality. Then we pray that whatever's left of the ghost of Wyoming is enough to save our priest. He looks at Isabella, years of unspoken suspicions in his gaze. Unless there's something else you want to tell us about Father Michael? She meets his gaze steadily, unflinching. Just that every man deserves a chance at redemption, even ghosts. Picking up her shawl, she heads for the door. I'll be at the church if anyone needs me. Someone has to be ready to pick up the pieces. As the council disperses into the night, Charlie Hayes lingers, watching Isabella's retreating figure through the grimy window. He pulls a worn wanted poster from his vest, yellowed with age, corners frayed by years of secret keeping. In the lamplight, the sketch is barely visible, A younger man with hard eyes and a pearl-handled Colt. Below it, the words "Wanted, the Ghost of Wyoming" fade into the paper, along with a reward that could buy half the territory. Charlie strikes a match, touches it to the poster's corner, and watches it burn. The flame catches his reflection in the window glass, making his eyes glow like dying embers. "Gonna be one hell of a sermon tomorrow," he whispers to no one in particular, as the last traces of the ghost's face curl into ash and float away on the night wind. Martinez's men gather at the Lucky Strike Saloon, their raucous laughter drowning out the piano player's nervous fingers. Snake Eyes himself sits at a corner table, golden tooth glinting as he deals cards. Behind him, through the grimy window, the church steeple pierces the star-filled sky like an accusing finger. "Boss," one of his lieutenants leans in, voice low. "Word is the priest ain't what he seems. Some saying he might be." Martinez's hand moves faster than a rattler's strike, grabbing the man's collar. "You think I don't know?" His whisper carries more menace than a shout. "Why'd you think I chose him? Been tracking that ghost for years." He releases his grip and pulls a weathered journal from his coat. The pages fall open to a sketched face. Younger, harder, but unmistakably Father Michael. Wyoming, 69. He killed my brother in a shootout. Vicente never even cleared leather. Martinez traces the sketch with a finger. Ghost disappeared 5 years ago. Then I hear whispers about a new priest in Arizona who moves like a gunslinger. At the bar, a young tough man wearing too much bravado and too little sense downs another whiskey. "Hell, boss, let me take him now, save you the trouble." The saloon goes quiet. Martinez's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Touch him before noon, and I'll kill you myself." He turns back to his cards. Ghost was always too quick for ambush. Needs to be face-to-face, professional-like. Outside, the wind carries their voices to Deputy Frank Miller, crouched in the shadows. His hands shake as he scribbles in a notebook. The territorial marshal might be 3 days away, but a telegram moves faster than any horse. Meanwhile, in the church rectory, Father Michael kneels beside his bed, not in prayer, but in preparation. The floorboards beneath his bed have been pried loose, revealing a shallow space. Inside lies a black box, its surface smooth from years of handling. "Thought I might find you here." Isabella's voice makes him freeze. She stands in the doorway, silhouetted by lamplight. "Still keeping secrets, Michael?" He doesn't turn. "Some secrets need keeping, Belle." "Like how Vicente Martinez died?" Her words hit him like physical blows. "Or should I say, how did the ghost kill him?" Michael's shoulders tense. The box lies open between them, revealing newspaper clippings, wanted posters, and a small silver cross stained dark with old blood. "How long have you known?" "Since you first stumbled into my clinic, bleeding from 4 bullet holes." She moves closer, her shadow falling across the box. "The ghost was never killed without reason. Vicente Martinez was different. Personal." Michael lifts the silver cross, its chain tangled with memories. "Vicente was running a protection racket in Colorado, burning churches, killing priests who wouldn't pay. I tracked him for weeks." His voice grows distant. "Found him in a mission chapel. He was counting his take on the altar. And his brother's been hunting you ever since. Jed Martinez was always the worst of the two." Michael's fingers close around the cross. "Vicente had greed. Jed has hate. He won't stop with just me." A floorboard creaks behind them. They turn to find Maria Ramirez, her young face pale in the darkness. "Father, there's something you need to know about Martinez." Michael gestures for her to enter, noting how she clutches a worn photograph. Maria's hands tremble as she hands it over. "My sister wasn't the first he tried to take. 3 years ago in Santa Fe." Her voice breaks. "My other sister, Carmen, she refused him. They found her body in the desert." Isabella takes the photograph. A family portrait. 3 sisters in their Sunday best. "Maria, why didn't you tell us?" Because Carmen wasn't just killed. Maria's eyes meet Michael's. She was a nun. Martinez has a taste for destroying holy things. When I heard he was coming here, she straightens her spine. I prayed for a warrior, not just a priest. Michael stares at the photograph for a long moment. Finally, he reaches into the box and withdraws a gun belt, different from the one beneath the altar. This one's black leather, tooled with intricate crosses. Reverend Pierce gave me this when I took my vows. Said sometimes a shepherd needs teeth to protect his flock. Michael, Isabella warns, if you do this, I know. He buckles the belt with practiced ease. But some sins weigh heavier than others, letting evil triumph when you have the power to stop it. He touches his collar. That's the one sin I'm not prepared to carry. The chapel bell tolls midnight. In the distance, a coyote howls, a lonely sound, like a soul caught between heaven and hell. Maria crosses herself. What will you do? Michael picks up his Bible, then places the silver cross inside it. First, I'm going to hear a confession. Then, his hand brushes the gun at his hip. Then, I'm going to give Martinez his judgment day. And what about your redemption? Isabella asks softly. Maybe this is it. He looks up at the crucified Christ on the wall. Sometimes salvation comes through fire. As they talk, none of them notice the shadow moving away from the window. Deputy Miller, his notebook full and his conscience heavy. The telegram office is closed, but sometimes duty can't wait until morning. Especially when tomorrow might bring either salvation or damnation to Redemption Springs. The hours before dawn weigh heavily in Redemption Springs. Father Michael sits in the confessional, the wooden booth's familiar embrace offering little comfort tonight. Through the latticed window, moonlight casts crossed shadows on his face. He's been here since midnight, hearing the sins of those who might not see another sunset. The worn wood beneath him bears witness to decades of whispered secrets, each grain soaked with the weight of human transgression. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Sheriff Wilson's voice comes rough through the screen, like sand over stone. Been 30 years since my last confession? A pause, heavy with unspoken burdens. Not even Catholic, truth be told. His badge catches the dim light as he shifts, a golden glint in the darkness. God's mercy knows no denomination, Tom. Michael's response carries the weight of experience, of a man who's walked both sides of redemption's road. What troubles your soul? The sheriff shifts, wood creaking beneath him like old bones. 20 years wearing this badge. Killed 17 men. Each one haunts me, but not as much as the ones I couldn't save. His voice drops to a whisper, barely louder than a dying man's prayer. Like Vicente Martinez's victims. The faces. Christ, the faces still wake me at night. Michael's hand tightens on his rosary, the beads cutting into his palm. You knew about Vicente? Was deputy marshal back then. Tracked him through 3 territories. Wilson's breath catches, the memory still raw after all these years. Found what was left of that mission in Colorado, the priests, the children. He swallows hard, the sound echoing in the confined space. Then the ghost got him, clean shot through the heart, right on the altar where he'd killed Father Dominic. Never saw shooting so precise, so righteous. And you never reported finding the ghost? Michael's question hangs in the air like gunsmoke. Some sins need answering. Vicente's death was God's justice, plain and simple. A long pause follows, filled with the weight of shared knowledge. Just like what needs doing tomorrow, this town's seen too much suffering already. Michael leans closer to the screen, his collar suddenly feeling tight. You know who I was. Known since you arrived. That scar on your neck. Saw it in a wanted poster once. 3-inch knife wound, left side, shaped like a cross. Wilson's voice carries a hint of professional admiration. But a man who trades his gun for a Bible? That's the kind of miracle this town needed. He stands, joints popping like distant gunshots. Whatever happens tomorrow, you should know. The deputy sent a telegram to the territorial marshal tonight. Frank? Why would he? Boy's got a conscience, even if his timing's poor. Marshal's probably riding hard as we speak, but... The sheriff's voice hardens like steel in quenching oil. He won't make it in time. And Martinez won't leave witnesses, badge or no badge. Man's got a particular hatred for authority figures who cross him. Through the confessional screen, Michael watches Wilson's silhouette straighten, shoulders squared against an unseen burden. One more thing, Father. That mission in Colorado? There was a survivor. Little girl, hiding in the chapel's root cellar. She saw everything, Vicente's work and the ghost's justice. Watched through a crack in the floorboards as good meet evil on consecrated ground. Michael's blood runs cold as desert nights. Maria. She recognized you the day you arrived, said she'd been praying for you to come. Wilson's boots scuff the floor, raising dust motes that dance in the moonlight. Guess some prayers get answered in strange ways. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Ain't that what you preach? The sheriff leaves, his steps echoing through the empty church like distant thunder. Michael remains seated, the revelation settling like lead in his stomach. Behind him, soft footsteps approach, bringing with them the familiar scent of medical supplies and gunpowder. My turn for confession? Isabella's voice carries a hint of their old familiarity, warm as Arizona sunshine. Belle? No, let me speak. She settles into the penitent's side, her skirts rustling like autumn leaves. I've carried this guilt for 5 years. When you came to my clinic that night half dead from Marshal Reynolds' posse, I should have turned you in. It was my duty as a citizen, as a healer sworn to do no harm. You saved my life instead. His words carry gratitude deeper than any prayer. Because I saw something in your eyes. Same thing I saw in soldiers during the war. Men who'd seen too much death, who needed a reason to live. Her voice catches like a bullet on bone. When Reverend Pierce offered you sanctuary, I thought you'd found peace. Maybe God had a plan for you beyond violence. Michael studies his hands in the dim light, seeing both blessing and trigger calluses written there. Peace was never in the cards, Belle. Not with Martinez out there. The old man who raised me used to say, "Can't outrun your shadow. Best you can do is face it." Tomorrow, my shadow catches up. And if facing it kills you, then I die as Michael Sullivan, not as the ghost. He touches his collar, feeling the weight of his vows. Made my peace with that the day I took these vows. Sometimes redemption demands a final sacrifice. Isabella's hand appears through the screen, holding something that glints in the darkness. Found this in my clinic storeroom, saved it from that night. A small leather pouch, worn smooth by time. Inside, a single bullet gleams, the one the doctor had pulled from his chest 5 years ago. The lead is misshapen, marked with rifling that matches Martinez's gun. Thought you might want it back, she whispers, her voice thick with unshed tears. For luck. Michael weighs the bullet in his palm, feeling its familiar weight. Luck's for gamblers, Belle. Tomorrow's about justice. And redemption? He slips the bullet into his pocket, close to his heart. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe that's what God's been trying to tell me all along. Outside, the first hint of dawn colors the eastern sky blood red. 6 hours until noon, until Redemption Springs learns if it harbors a priest or a ghost. In the distance, a lone rider approaches through the pre-dawn gloom. Deputy Miller returning from the telegraph office, unaware that his message of hope might have sealed the town's fate. The chapel bell tolls once, marking the hour, its sound carrying both promise and warning across the sleeping town. The pre-dawn hours cast long shadows across Redemption Springs as Deputy Frank Miller's horse clops wearily down the main street. His shoulders slump with exhaustion, but a sense of accomplishment brightens his young face. The telegraph operator had opened his office specially, accepting triple pay to send an urgent message to the territorial marshal. The satisfaction is short-lived. As he approaches the jailhouse, movement catches his eye. Dark figures slipping between buildings like desert wraiths. Miller reins his horse to a stop, hand dropping to his gun. Too late. A rope whistles through the air, yanking him from his saddle. "Shoulda minded your own business, boy." Snake Eyes Martinez emerges from the shadows, boots clicking against the packed earth. His men drag Miller to his feet, blood trickling from a split lip. "Now, what exactly did you tell the marshal?" Miller spits blood. "Go to hell." Martinez's golden tooth glints in the starlight as he smiles. "Already Ben didn't take it." He nods to his men. "Take him to the old mine. Make him comfortable. Afternoon we'll have a proper conversation about loyalty." In the church, Father Michael hears the commotion but forces himself to remain kneeling. The pre-dawn prayers have always been his favorite. The quiet moments when night surrenders to day, when possibility hangs thick as morning mist. But today, each prayer feels like farewell. "You always prayed hardest before a fight." Isabella's voice carries from the doorway. She holds a steaming cup of coffee, strong enough to float a horseshoe. Some habits don't change, ghost or priest. Michael accepts the cup, inhaling the familiar aroma. "Reverend Pierce taught me that. Said prayer steadies the hand and calms the heart." "Did he know? About who you were?" "He knew everything." Michael sips the bitter brew. "Found me dying in that canyon, bullet in my chest. Could have let me bleed out. Instead, he carried me 12 miles to your clinic." His fingers trace the rim of the cup. "Said God wasn't finished with me yet." Isabella settles beside him in the front pew. "And now?" What would he say about today? He'd quote Matthew, "Those who live by the sword." Michael's voice trails off. "Die by the sword," Isabella finishes. She reaches into her medical bag, withdrawing a small bottle. "Laudanum. For the pain. That old wound troubles you in the morning, doesn't it?" Michael shakes his head. "Need a clear mind today." "Then take this instead." She presses something cold into his hand. A deputy's badge. "Found Miller's horse wandering by the creek. No sign of him." The badge catches the first gray light of dawn. Michael's jaw tightens. "Martinez." "He's forcing your hand. Making sure no help comes." Isabella's voice carries professional detachment, but her hands tremble slightly. "If you walk out there at noon, I know." Michael places the badge on the pew. "But if I don't, Miller dies, and Martinez burns this town to the ground anyway." The sound of horses draws them to the window. Luke Blackwood leads a group of townsmen down the street, rifles across their saddles. They're heading for the old mine, determination written in every line of their bodies. "Fools," Isabella whispers. "They'll get themselves killed." Michael stands, decision crystallizing like morning frost. Not if they don't find him. He buckles on the gun belt from beneath the altar, checking the action of the peacemaker with practiced ease. "I'm going after Miller. That's what Martinez wants. Draw you out early, catch you away from town." "No choice." Michael shrugs into his black duster. "Can't let them die for my sins." Isabella grabs his arm. "Your sins were forgiven the day you took that collar. Don't throw away 5 years of redemption for revenge." "This isn't about revenge." Michael gently removes her hand. "It's about protecting the flock. Isn't that what a good shepherd does?" Before she can answer, Maria bursts into the church, face flushed with running. "Father, Luke and the others, Martinez's men ambushed them at Cherry Creek Crossing. They're pinned down." Michael checks his gun one final time, the pearl grip fitting his hand like it never left. "Ring the bell, Maria. Wake the town. Tell them to bar their doors." He turns to Isabella. "Get your clinic ready. They'll be wounded before this day's done." "Michael?" Isabella starts, but he's already moving. "I know," he says, pausing at the door. "The ghost died in that canyon, but maybe that's who God needs today." He steps into the growing dawn, the first rays of sunrise painting the church steeple gold. Behind him, The bell begins to toll. Not the measured rings of morning prayer, but the rapid peals of alarm. Redemption Springs is waking to war, and somewhere in the distance, a marshal's posse rides hard, racing against time and fate toward a town balanced between salvation and damnation. Cherry Creek cuts through the desert like a scar, its banks steep and treacherous in the early morning light. Luke Blackwood and his men lie pinned behind scattered boulders as bullets chip away at their cover, sending stone fragments flying like deadly hornets. The morning sun, barely above the horizon, throws long shadows across the creek bed that offer little protection against the ruthless assault. "Save your ammunition!" Luke shouts over the relentless gunfire, his voice hoarse from the dust. "They're trying to keep us here till noon." A bullet sends rock fragments spraying across his weathered face, drawing blood. Through the settling dust, he counts at least 8 of Martinez's men on the ridgeline, their rifles glinting in the dawn light. Mark Blackwood, blood seeping through his shirt from a graze on his shoulder, checks his Winchester's chamber with trembling hands. 2 rounds left. Make that one good one. He peers around the boulder, quickly pulling back as bullets spark against stone. "Where's Joe?" A weak groan answers from behind a gnarled scrub oak. Old Joe Murphy lies there, one hand clutched to his side where dark blood seeps between age-spotted fingers. His other hand still grips his rifle, though it hasn't fired in minutes. "Don't waste worry on me, boys. Just get word back to town." His words end in a wet cough. The shooting suddenly intensifies, the sound echoing off the creek walls like thunder. One of Martinez's men stands up from his position, pointing excitedly toward the south. "Rider coming!" Fast and low. Through the morning haze that clings to the creek bed, a black-clad figure on horseback approaches at full gallop, kicking up a trail of dust that glows golden in the sunrise. The rider's duster streams behind him like dark wings, and morning light glints off something in his raised hand. Not a gun, but a silver cross that catches the light like a beacon of hope. "Hold your fire!" One of Martinez's men shouts, recognition and fear mixing in his voice. "Boss said no. Shoot the priest before noon." Father Michael rides straight through the hail of gunfire, bullets kicking up dust around him like a devil's dance. His voice carries across the creek bed strong and clear as a church bell. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The cross in his upraised hand catches sunlight like a blade. "He maketh me lie down in green pastures." Martinez's men hesitate, some crossing themselves reflexively, their Catholic upbringing warring with their violent intentions. It's all the opening Michael needs. His free hand drops to his hip in a motion so smooth it seems almost casual. The peacemaker clears leather in one fluid movement that speaks of years of practice. 3 shots ring out before anyone can react, the sound sharp and final in the morning air. 3 of Martinez's men fall, their bodies tumbling down the ridge like broken dolls. The others dive for cover, their confident attack turning to chaos in the face of sudden death. Michael wheels his horse in a tight circle, gun now replacing cross in his steady hand. He leadeth me beside the still waters. 2 more shots crack out like Judgment Day, and 2 more men fall. No wasted bullets, no second chances. Each shot finds its mark with terrible precision. Luke and his men watch in stunned silence as the priest they've known for 5 years transforms before their eyes. Every movement speaks of deadly grace. Every shot finds its home with surgical accuracy. This is no man of God. This is death on horseback, wearing a priest's collar like a battle flag. "Sweet Jesus," Mark whispers, crossing himself with a trembling hand. "The ghost of Wyoming." The remaining outlaws break, scrambling for their horses with the desperate energy of men who've seen their own mortality written in gunsmoke. Michael's voice follows them, reciting psalms between shots that echo like church bells. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil." When the dust settles, 7 of Martinez's men lie dead or wounded on the blood-stained ground. Michael dismounts smoothly, checking each fallen man with professional detachment. Those still breathing, He tends to with practiced hands. Battlefield medicine learned in another life, another time when he dealt in both death and mercy. Father, Luke approaches cautiously, as one might approach a wolf in shepherd's clothing. We didn't mean to. Get Joe to Isabella's clinic, Michael interrupts, not looking up from bandaging a wounded outlaw's shoulder with strips torn from his own shirt. Mark II. Flesh wound, but it needs cleaning. Infection's as deadly as any bullet out here. What about you? Michael reloads his peacemaker with mechanical precision, each bullet sliding home like a prayer. Still got a deputy to find. He looks up finally, and his eyes are different, harder, colder. The eyes of a man who's killed more times than he's prayed. Take a message to Belle. Tell her Cherry Creek was just the beginning. Martinez won't take this lightly. The whole town's talking, Mark says, cradling his wounded arm. About who you really are? Who I am doesn't matter. Michael mounts up, checking the sun's position with a gunfighter's instinct. 4 hours till noon. What matters is who Martinez is about to become, another notch on a dead man's gun. As he gathers his reins, the wounded outlaw he'd just bandaged stirs, grabbing weakly at Michael's boot. Ghost, he calls, blood staining his teeth. Martinez knew you'd come. Said to tell you. The deputy's just bait. Real targets back in town. Michael reins his horse around sharply, dread settling in his stomach like lead. What target? The girl, Maria. Said poetic justice demands another church burning. The man coughs blood onto the thirsty desert sand. Already sent men to get her, said this time. This time there won't be any survivors in the root cellar. The sound of Michael's spurs fades quickly as he races back toward town, leaving a cloud of dust that glows red in the morning sun. Behind him, the morning light paints the dead men's blood black against the crimson desert sand. The ghost of Wyoming rides again, but this time, his prayers are real, and so is his rage. Redemption Springs stirs to life as the sun climbs higher, unaware of the violence at Cherry Creek. Isabella Hawthorne organizes her clinic, laying out bandages and instruments with military precision. Her hands move quickly, but her mind races faster, counting down the hours until noon. The door bursts open, startling her. 2 of Martinez's men drag a struggling Maria between them, their boots leaving muddy tracks on the clean floor. Behind them enters Snake Eyes himself, a golden tooth catching the morning light. Morning, doctor. Martinez tips his hat with mock courtesy. Thought you might want to know. Your priest friend just killed 7 of my men. Isabella's face remains neutral as she continues arranging her instruments. I treat the wounded, Senor Martinez. I don't take sides. Admirable policy. He moves closer, examining a row of surgical tools. But today you're going to make an exception. His hand closes around a scalpel. See? I need your help sending a message. Let her go, Isabella says quietly, nodding toward Maria. She's just a girl. Martinez's smile vanishes. Just a girl? Like my brother's victims were just priests? He presses the scalpel against Maria's throat. Tell me, doctor, did the ghost confess his sins to you that night, when you dug Reynolds's bullet out of him? Isabella's breath catches. How did you— 5 years of searching teaches you things. Martinez forces Maria into a chair. Like how a wanted killer became a man of God. How a desert clinic became a sanctuary. His eyes harden. How a good Catholic girl helped murder my brother. Your brother was a monster, Maria spits, earning a backhand that splits her lip. Careful, Nina. Martinez wipes blood from his knuckles. Wouldn't want to start the fire before the ghost arrives. Isabella moves subtly toward her desk, where a loaded derringer lies hidden in a drawer. What do you want? Want? Martinez laughs. I want to finish what Vicente started. A church in ashes, a town that learns respect, and the ghost's soul in hell where it belongs. He gestures to his men. Tie them up. When Michael Sullivan rides in to save them. He draws his silver-plated revolver. Well, let's just say some ghosts need killing twice. Outside, hoofbeats approach at a gallop. Martinez's smile widens. Right on time. But it's not Michael who appears in the doorway. Sheriff Wilson stands there, badge gleaming, both guns drawn. Let them go, Jed. Martinez doesn't turn around. Brought a badge to a massacre, Tom? Brave. Stupid, but brave. Not just a badge. Wilson's voice carries steel. Got 30 armed men surrounding this building. Townspeople are tired of living under your shadow. 30 against my whole gang? Martinez seems amused. Bad odds. Your gang's scattered, running scared. Ghost took care of that at Cherry Creek. Wilson steps forward. It's over. Martinez moves faster than thought. His gun cracks once and Wilson staggers, red blooming across his chest. Nothing's over till I say it is. Isabella lunges for her drawer, but Martinez's men are quicker. They pin her arms as their boss approaches the fallen sheriff. Wilson lies gasping, blood pooling beneath him. Funny thing about ghosts, Martinez muses, standing over Wilson. They're drawn to blood, to death. He kicks away Wilson's guns. By noon, this clinic will have plenty of both. Maria struggles against her captors. Father Michael will kill you all. That's the plan, Nina. Martinez reloads his revolver with practiced ease. But first, he's going to watch everyone he loves burn, starting with you, the girl he couldn't save last time. As if in answer, the church bell begins to toll. 8 chimes, 4 hours until noon. Martinez moves to the window, watching the street fill with townspeople drawn by the gunshot. Perfect. He turns to his men. Barricade the doors. Anyone tries to enter, shoot them. Doctor, keep the sheriff alive, for now. Want him conscious when the ghost arrives. His golden tooth glints in the morning light. After all, every good story needs witnesses. Isabella kneels beside Wilson, pressing bandages against his wound. Her hands are steady, but her eyes meet Maria's with shared understanding. They're no longer hostages, they're bait in a trap 5 years in the making. And somewhere between Cherry Creek and Redemption Springs, a black-clad rider races against time, Dawn's shadows stretching before him like the hands of the damned reaching for salvation. Deputy Frank Miller wakes to darkness and the taste of copper in his mouth, his tongue probing a split lip that throbs with each heartbeat. The old mine shaft creaks around him, supporting beams groaning under the weight of earth and memory. His hands are bound behind him with rough rope that bites into his wrists, shoulders screaming from hours in the same position. The musty scent of damp earth and old timber fills his nostrils. Finally awake. A match flares in the darkness, illuminating a weather-beaten face scarred by the years of violence. Iron Hand, McGrath, Martinez's enforcer, lights a cigarette with deliberate slowness. The glow reveals other figures in the shadows, more of Martinez's men, waiting like carrion birds in the gloom. Their gun belts jingle softly as they shift positions, nervous energy filling the confined space. Boss said to keep you alive, McGrath drawls, smoke curling around his words like desert snakes. Didn't say anything about keeping you comfortable. He flexes his right hand, the iron prosthetic that earned him his nickname clicking mechanically. The sound echoes off the mine walls, a metallic reminder of his reputation for cruelty. Miller tests his bonds, earning a kick to the ribs that leaves him gasping. The marshal's coming, he manages through gritted teeth. Marshal's 3 days out. McGrath's iron hand catches the lamplight, casting strange shadows on the tunnel walls. By then, Redemption Springs will be ash and the ghost will be dead, just like his precious church. Ghost? Miller coughs, tasting fresh blood on his tongue. The word carries weight in the darkness, like a confession waiting to be heard. McGrath's laugh echoes off the mine walls, hollow and cold as an empty grave. Your precious padre. Should have seen him at Cherry Creek. 7 men dead before they could blink. Guess old habits die hard. Once a killer, always a killer. Collar or no collar. Outside, the desert wind carries the distant toll of the church bell, marking another hour's passage. 3 hours until noon. until judgment comes to Redemption Springs. "Tell me, deputy." McGrath leans close, tobacco breath hot on Miller's face. "You ever hear how the ghost got his name? It ain't just because he's hard to kill." He takes a long drag, the cigarette's glow illuminating his scarred features. Story goes, he'd appear out of nowhere like a spirit of vengeance. No warning, no mercy. Just the sound of prayer before the bullets flew. The darkness seems to deepen as McGrath continues, his voice dropping to a whisper heavy with remembered fear. Vicente Martinez found that out the hard way. Ghost caught him counting blood money on a church altar. Killed him right there. Left the body for the priests to find. His iron hand taps a rhythm against his gun belt, metal on leather like distant thunder. But here's the thing about ghosts. They're drawn to familiar places, to old sins. A sound echoes through the mind shaft. Footsteps, soft and measured as a funeral march. McGrath's men shift nervously, hands dropping to their weapons. The air grows thick with tension and the metallic scent of fear. "Our Father, who art in heaven." The voice carries like smoke through the tunnels, each word a death knell. McGrath's cigarette drops from suddenly nerveless fingers, embers dying in the dust. "Hallowed be thy name." Closer now, the words taking on substance in the darkness. The lamplight flickers, shadows dancing on rough-hewn walls like souls in torment. McGrath draws his gun with his good hand, iron prosthetic gleaming dully. "Spread out. Don't let him. Thy kingdom come." A figure materializes from the darkness, black duster swirling like angels' wings. The peacemaker speaks 3 times, its voice sharp and final. 3 of McGrath's men fall, their bodies hitting the ground before the echoes fade. "Thy will be done." Michael steps into the lamplight, eyes hard as desert stone and twice as cold. 2 more shots ring out, and 2 more bodies join their companions in the dust. McGrath raises his gun, iron hand steady as a rock. "Should have stayed dead in that canyon, Ghost. On earth as it is in heaven and Michael's voice never wavers. The peacemaker clears leather faster than human eyes can follow, its barrel catching light like the fires of judgment. McGrath's shot goes wide. Michael's doesn't. The enforcer falls, his iron hand spasming against the packed earth, fingers clicking out a death rhythm that echoes through the mine. Michael moves to Miller, cutting his bonds with a knife that appears from nowhere like a magician's trick. His movements are efficient, precise, the motions of a man who's done this countless times before. "Can you ride?" The priest's voice is gentle now, all traces of the prayer killer gone. But something lurks behind his eyes, something old and dangerous and not quite buried. Miller rubs his wrists, staring at the bodies scattered around them like fallen leaves. "You really are him, the ghost." "Was." Michael helps him stand, supporting him when his legs threaten to buckle. "Now I'm just a shepherd trying to protect his flock." He checks his gun with practiced ease, 2 bullets left. Martinez has the clinic. Isabella, Maria, and the sheriff are inside. "How'd you know?" "Because that's what I would have done." Michael's eyes are distant, seeing past the mine's walls, to some darker memory. "Use the ones they love against them, make them watch as everything burns." The church bell tolls again, marking another hour past. Miller sees something change in the priest's face. A hardening, a return of something ancient and terrible, like watching a mask of peace crack to reveal the warrior beneath. "Get to the telegraph office," Michael orders, checking his remaining ammunition with the precision of a man counting prayers. "When the marshal comes, tell him." He pauses, and for a moment, the ghost's smile flickers across his face. "Tell him the ghost sends his regards." "Where are you going?" Michael steps into the light, and for a moment, Miller sees both men, the deadly specter of legend and the holy man of peace, merged into something new and dangerous, like an avenging angel dressed in a preacher's clothes. Going to finish what started in that mission 5 years ago. The peacemaker disappears beneath his duster like a snake returning to its den. Time to lay some ghosts to rest. As Michael rides toward town, The rising sun catches his collar, making the silver cross gleam like a star in the darkness. 2 hours until noon, and Redemption Springs holds its breath, waiting to see which man will arrive, the priest seeking absolution, or the ghost demanding blood. Redemption Springs bakes under the climbing sun as tension thickens like summer heat. Isabella works methodically on Sheriff Wilson's wound, her practiced hands steady despite the gun trained on her back. The bullet went clean through, missing vital organs. A professional shot, meant to wound rather than kill. The metallic scent of blood mingles with antiseptic, a familiar combination from too many similar days. He taught you that, didn't he? Martinez watches from his chair by the window, revolver resting casually as a conversation on his knee. Morning light catches the elaborate engravings on his gun barrel. Names and dates, a ledger of death. The ghost. Saw him use that same technique in Dodge City. Wound a man to draw out the ones who'd come to help. Called it fishing for friends. Isabella doesn't look up from her work, focusing on the neat stitches closing Wilson's wound. Michael Sullivan is a man of God. Michael Sullivan doesn't exist. Martinez's golden tooth catches the light as he smiles, a predator's grin. Just a name the ghost borrowed, like that collar he wears. A costume for a killer playing at Redemption. He stands, spurs jingling against the wooden floor as he moves to where Maria sits bound to a chair. Tell her, Nina. Tell her what you saw on that mission. Maria's split lip has swollen purple-black, but her eyes burn with defiance. Blood has dried on her chin where Martinez struck her earlier. I saw justice. The slap echoes through the clinic like a gunshot. You saw murder. My brother gunned down while begging for mercy. Martinez grabs her chin, fingers digging into bruised flesh. Ghost didn't even let him finish his prayers, shot him right there on consecrated ground. Your brother was collecting protection money from a church orphanage. Maria spits blood onto Martinez's polished boots. He killed 3 priests who couldn't pay, burned their bodies in the chapel. Business is business. Martinez releases her roughly, wiping his hand on his vest as if touching her had soiled him. Ghost had no right to play judge, no right to execute a man in God's house. And you do? Isabella finishes bandaging Wilson, who lies semi-conscious on her examination table, his breathing shallow but steady. All this elaborate setup for revenge? Martinez laughs, the sound sharp as breaking glass in the quiet clinic. Revenge? No, doctor. This is about reputation. He moves to the window, watching townspeople gather in the street like mourners before a funeral. Every killer west of the Mississippi knows the ghost story. How he vanished, found religion, became a holy man. His fingers drum against his gun belt, a nervous tell at odds with his confident posture. Kill a legend like that, in front of witnesses? That's worth more than gold. That's immortality. A commotion outside draws their attention. Luke Blackwood leads a group of armed townsmen down the street, rifles glinting in the sun like a ragged honor guard. Martinez's men tense, hands dropping to weapons, but their boss waves them down with casual authority. Let them come. He checks his revolver with practiced care, each motion precise as a ceremony. More witnesses to the ghost's fall. More voices to spread the story. You're wrong about him, Isabella says quietly, her hands methodically cleaning blood-stained instruments. The man who became Father Sullivan. That transformation was real. I watched it happen. Watched him fight his way back from darkness. People don't change, doctor, they just wear different masks. Martinez's eyes narrow as he studies the street below. Ghost proved that at Cherry Creek. 7 men died, each shot through the heart. That's not prayer, that's muscle memory. The kind you can't unlearn, no matter how many collars you hide behind. The church bell tolls, the sound rolling across Redemption Springs like thunder. 1 hour until noon. Martinez's men shift nervously, checking weapons and sightlines, the weight of approaching destiny heavy in the air. Their boss seems to grow calmer as the moment approaches, like a snake coiling before its strike. You know what's funny? He turns to Isabella, genuine amusement dancing in his serpentine eyes. Ghost probably thinks he's coming to save you, doesn't realize he's walking into his own execution. He draws a second gun with theatrical flourish, this one pearl-handled and achingly familiar. Found this in the mine shaft. Deputy was carrying it, trying to reach the marshal. Isabella's breath catches in her throat. Michael's spare peacemaker, the one he'd kept hidden beneath the altar. The one meant for last resorts and final stands. Poetic, isn't it? Martinez weighs the gun in his hand like a priest testing communion wine. Ghost's own gun, sending him back to hell. He places it on the windowsill, barrel catching sunlight like a beacon. But first, he needs proper motivation, something to remind him of old debts. He gestures to his men, the motion sharp and decisive. Get the lamp oil. Start with the back room. His golden tooth glints as he smiles, throwing back sunset-colored light. Let's give him a proper welcome, something to remind him of old times, of burning missions and broken vows. Outside, the town holds its breath. Armed men take positions on rooftops and behind water troughs, more appearing every minute like mourners at a wake. Women hustle children indoors, boarding windows against the coming storm. Prayers mix with curses in the dusty street, as Redemption Springs prepares for judgment. And somewhere in the desert heat, hoofbeats approach, steady as a heartbeat, inevitable as damnation. The ghost of Wyoming rides to his final showdown, while Father Michael Sullivan races to save his flock. Soon, Redemption Springs will learn which man survives when prayers and bullets speak the same language, and whether redemption comes through fire or faith. The sun climbs toward its zenith as Father Michael approaches Redemption Springs, desert heat shimmering off the packed earth like souls rising to judgment. His black duster bears the dust of hard riding, and the peacemaker at his hip feels heavier with each passing mile, weighted with both bullet and burden. Behind him, Deputy Miller rides toward the telegraph office, carrying hope of rescue. But ahead, smoke rises from the clinic. Thin wisps now, a promise of inferno to come, a grim echo of another fire 5 years past. Luke Blackwood intercepts him at the town's edge, rifle cradled in weathered hands like a child needing comfort. 7 of Martinez's men at the clinic, more on the rooftops. His voice drops to a whisper, carried away by the hot wind. They're pouring lamp oil inside. Maria and Belle are still in there, along with the sheriff. Wilson's hurt badly, but alive. Michael dismounts with fluid grace that speaks more of a gunfighter than priest, eyes scanning the street with a predator's precision. Every window becomes a potential sniper's nest. Every shadow, a threat. The Blackwood store. Does the tunnel still run beneath it? The old smuggling route? Luke nods, understanding dawning in his eyes. Hasn't been used since Pa's day, but it's there. Comes up right behind the clinic. Used to move contraband when the law got too curious. Get your men ready. When the shooting starts, get everyone out. Michael checks his ammunition with mechanical efficiency. 2 bullets left. Not enough. Never enough for the weight of redemption. What about Martinez? He's mine. Michael's voice carries the weight of old sins and older promises. Been mine since Colorado, since he made me choose between justice and mercy. The street clears as he walks toward the clinic, collar stark white against his black coat like a flag of truce. Windows shutter closed, doors bolt. A town preparing for war or witnessing an execution. Above, the church bell begins to toll, marking the approach of noon with the regularity of a hangman's drum. Inside the clinic, Martinez hears the footsteps approach, measured as a funeral march. Right on time. He moves to the window, pearl-handled peacemaker ready in hands that have dreamed of this moment for 5 years. Just like old days, eh, Ghost? Though usually you preferred ambush to fair fight, shooting men while they prayed. Let them go, Jed. Michael's voice carries clearly down the empty street, the authority of both gun and God in his tone. This is between us. Has been since your brother fell. Between us? Martinez laughs, the sound sharp as broken glass. No, Ghost. This is between you and God. Between the killer you are and the saint you pretend to be. He signals his men, who drag Maria to the window, her face bloody but defiant. Remember this view? Little girl watching from below as justice was served? As you played God with my brother's life? Michael's hands remain steady at his sides, but those who know where to look can see the ghost stirring beneath the priest's calm. Your brother made his choice when he burned those children. And you made yours, playing executioner in a house of God. Martinez presses his gun to Maria's temple, metal kissing flesh. Now, it's my turn to pass judgment. But first, a reminder of what happens to those who defy divine will. A match strikes inside the clinic, sulfur smell mixing with lamp oil. The air grows thick with the promise of cleansing fire. You won't leave here alive, Michael warns, but his voice carries something else now. Not threat, but certainty. The voice of a man reading last rites over an open grave. Maybe not. Martinez's golden tooth catches the sun like a signal mirror. But I'll live forever as the man who killed the ghost, who proved that sinners can't become saints, that the past always collects its debts. He cocks his gun with theatrical precision. Any last prayers, Padre? Michael's right hand twitches but doesn't move to his weapon. Instead, he reaches for his collar, fingers steady as a surgeon's. Just one. The white strip of cloth falls to the dust like a surrendered flag. Forgive me, Father, for what I'm about to do. The street holds its breath, dust hanging motionless in the air. High above, the church bell strikes noon, its voice carrying both blessing and curse. What happens next becomes legend in Redemption Springs, told and retold in saloons and Sunday schools alike. Before the first toll fades, Michael drops, not diving for cover, but straight down, through rotted boards into the forgotten tunnel below. Martinez's shot passes through empty air as shadows swallow the priest like death reclaiming its own. Find him, Martinez roars, but it's too late. The floor behind them explodes upward in a shower of splinters and shadow. Michael rises like his namesake, a ghost from the grave, vengeance with a collar. 2 shots ring out before anyone can turn. 2 of Martinez's men fall, lamp oil cans spilling from dead hands like blood from a sacrificial altar. Get them out, Michael shouts. Luke and his men burst through the front door in confusion, grabbing Isabella and Maria. Sheriff Wilson, barely conscious, is carried to safety as gunfire erupts from every direction, turning the clinic into Hell's Own chapel. Martinez spins, bringing up both guns, his own and the stolen peacemaker, past and present in each hand. But Michael's already moving, closing the distance like judgment closing on sin. They crash together, holy man and devil, killer and judge, brothers' blood between them like communion wine. The guns speak once, twice, 3 times. Windows shatter like broken commandments. Blood blooms on black cloth. Both men stagger in their fatal dance. Can't kill a ghost, Martinez gasps, golden tooth red with blood like a fallen angel's crown. Michael stands straight, though crimson stains his shirt where Martinez's bullets found home. Not trying to. His gun presses against Martinez's chest, right over the heart, the same shot that killed Vicente. Trying to save one. The final shot echoes like thunder through Redemption Springs. Martinez falls, eyes wide with something like recognition, perhaps even understanding. The stolen peacemaker drops from lifeless fingers, its pearl grip stained with both men's blood. Absolvo te, Michael whispers, making the sign of the cross over his fallen enemy. May God have mercy on your soul. He retrieves his collar from the dust, but doesn't put it back on. Instead, he walks toward the church, leaving a trail of blood in the desert sand, a crimson path between who he was and who he's become. Behind him, the first flames begin to lick at the clinic walls, a pyre for old sins and older ghosts, while ahead, the church beckons with promises of either absolution or judgment. Flames consume the clinic as Michael stumbles toward the church, each step leaving crimson footprints in desert dust like a twisted version of the Stations of the Cross. 2 of Martinez's bullets found their mark, one buried deep in his shoulder, another grazing his side, cutting a furrow through flesh and memory. The wounds burn like old sins seeking remembrance, each heartbeat pushing more life onto his black duster. Isabella runs to him, medical bag clutched tight, her skirts gathering dust from the street. "You're bleeding out." Her professional eye catalogs his injuries, measuring his remaining minutes in heartbeats and drops of blood. "Inside," he manages, nodding toward the church. Behind them, townspeople work to contain the fire, forming a bucket line from the horse trough to the clinic's burning shell. The morning's violence has left its mark on Redemption Springs. Broken windows stare like blinded eyes. Bullet-scarred walls tell silent stories, and 6 dead men who rode with Martinez lie cooling in the dust, their final prayers lost to desert wind. The church interior feels cooler, shadows dancing from votive candles like restless spirits seeking peace. Michael collapses into a pew as Isabella cuts away his shirt with practiced efficiency. The wound in his shoulder wells dark blood, too close to his heart for comfort. Martinez? Dead. She probes the wound professionally, fingers seeking the buried lead. Like his brother. Different. Michael winces as she extracts the bullet with a surgeon's precision. Vicente died cursing God and man alike. Jed, he understood at the end. Saw what his brother couldn't. The church door creaks open on ancient hinges. Maria enters, her face cleaned of blood but bruises darkening, carrying Michael's fallen collar like a sacred relic. Behind her, other townspeople gather. Luke Blackwood with powder burns on his sleeves. Sheriff Wilson supported by his deputy. Both men pale from blood loss but standing proud. The Blackwood brothers carrying their father's old rifles. Even quick draw. Charlie Hayes, his gun hand finally still. "Quite a sermon, Padre," Charlie says, holstering his gun with unusual reverence. "Though I reckon that's not the right title anymore. Ain't many priests can shoot like that." Michael accepts his collar from Maria but doesn't put it on, the white fabric stark against his blood-stained hands. "Was never really mine to wear. Ghost or priest can't be both." "That's not true." Reverend Pierce's voice surprises them all, carrying the weight of ages. The old priest stands in the doorway, leaning on a walking stick, desert dust coating his traditional black cassock. "I've been following your trail since Martinez's men burned my mission in Santa Fe. Knew you'd need answers when the past finally caught up." "Father?" Michael tries to stand, but Isabella pushes him back with firm hands. "Sit still before you bleed out," she orders, continuing to stitch his wounds with the same care she'd shown 5 years ago, when a dying gunfighter first stumbled into her clinic seeking salvation. Pierce approaches slowly, age evident in every step, each click of his cane on wooden floors like a bell tolling. "You think taking a life means you can't save souls? That violence negates virtue?" He reaches into his worn cassock, movements deliberate as prayer. "I carried this for 5 years, waiting for the right moment." He withdraws a letter sealed with the bishop's mark, the red wax catching candlelight like freshly spilled blood. "After Colorado, after you found your way to my door, I wrote to Rome, told them everything about the ghost, about Vicente Martinez, about a killer who wanted redemption, about a man who chose to defend God's children with more than just prayers." "They know." Michael's voice cracks like a penitent's. "They know." Pierce hands him the letter, parchment heavy with the weight of judgment and mercy. "And they understand that sometimes God's justice needs a sword as well as a shepherd's staff. The collar is yours, Michael Sullivan, if you still want it, ghost and all." Michael stares at the letter, hands trembling from blood loss and revelation. "I killed a man today. You saved a town." Wilson speaks up from where he leans against the wall, his sheriff's badge catching light like a star in darkness. "Saved my life. Saved all of us when running would have been easier." "The ghost did that," Michael corrects, bitterness edging his words. "Not Father Sullivan." "Maybe," Pierce says gently, laying a weathered hand on Michael's shoulder. They're the same man. Like shadow and light, one can't exist without the other. The Lord works through many instruments, even those stained with blood. Isabella finishes her stitching, wiping blood from her hands with a cloth that quickly turns crimson. 5 years ago, you came to my clinic more dead than alive. Said you were running from who you were. She touches his arm, her touch carrying healing and understanding both. Maybe you were running toward who you needed to become. Outside, the fire at the clinic dies down, smoke rising like incense to the desert sky. The church bell tolls once, marking the hour after noon. Michael looks at his collar, then at the letter, weighing more than paper in his hands. The choice between past and future is balanced on a knife's edge. There's blood on these hands, he whispers, holding up fingers that have pulled triggers and offered blessings in equal measure. There's blood on the cross, too, Pierce reminds him, gesturing to the crucifix above the altar. Sacrifice and salvation often wear the same face. The question is not whether your hands are clean, but whether they serve a greater purpose. Michael unfolds his collar slowly. The white fabric bears desert dust and gun smoke, like his soul bearing both blessing and burden. If I put this back on, you'll be what you've always been, Maria says softly, standing beside him like the child she was in that mission long ago. A protector, a guardian, a man who understands that sometimes mercy comes from strength, not weakness. The church falls silent as Michael rises, wounds protesting every movement. He faces the altar, the cross above it catching light like a drawn blade. With hands that have dealt both death and benediction, he returns the collar to its place at his throat, completing the circle of redemption. "Bless me, Father," he says to Pierce, kneeling despite his injuries, blood seeping through Isabella's fresh bandages. "For I have sinned, and I will sin again, if that's what it takes to protect this flock." Pierce places a weathered hand on Michael's head, blessing and burden in equal measure. In nomine Patris et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. May God grant you the wisdom to know when to be the shepherd and when to be the sword. The afternoon sun streams through the stained glass, painting the scene in colors of blood and glory, shadow and light merged at last. Outside, Redemption Springs begins to heal its wounds, while inside, a ghost finds peace, understanding at last that some haunting is holy, and some sins carry their own salvation. The territorial marshal arrives at sunset, leading a dozen armed men into Redemption Springs. Their horses' hooves kick up dust tinged red by the dying sun, like echoes of the day's bloodshed. They find a town changed, not broken, but tempered like steel in fire. The clinic stands in ruins, its ashes settling in the desert wind, while 6 fresh graves mark the new cemetery. Martinez's body lies in the undertaker's, waiting for his family to claim what remains of their cursed legacy. Deputy Miller meets them at the town's edge, standing straighter than he did that morning, as if the weight of the witness has strengthened his spine. "You're late, Marshal. Rode as hard as we could." Marshal Reynolds dismounts, his eyes tracking the bullet marks on buildings like a man reading scripture. "The ghost?" "Father Sullivan," Miller corrects, emphasis on the title heavy with meaning. "He's in the church, where he belongs." Reynolds finds Michael in the chapel, kneeling despite his wounds, shadow and candlelight playing across his shoulders like battling angels. The white collar stands stark against his black coat, both now clean of blood, but bearing invisible stains that only God can see. The marshal removes his hat, years of pursuit weighing heavy in his hands. 5 years I hunted you, Reynolds says quietly, his voice carrying respect rather than accusation. Never thought I'd find you wearing that collar. Never thought I'd be glad of it. Michael doesn't turn, his prayers uninterrupted. Going to arrest me, Marshal? Got a wire from the territorial governor. Reynolds draws a paper from his vest, the official seal catching lamplight. Full pardon for the ghost of Wyoming. Seems the bishop himself vouched for your rehabilitation. Said sometimes the Lord works through unlikely vessels. Now Michael does turn, candlelight casting shadows across his face that dance between his past and present selves. Justice comes in many forms. Mercy, too, though that lesson came harder. So does redemption. Reynolds steps closer, studying the man who was once the territory's most feared gunman, searching for traces of the ghost in the priest's eyes. Martinez's gang won't trouble anyone else. Word's already spreading about how they met their end. About a priest who remembers how to shoot and a ghost who learned how to pray. Outside, Isabella's voice carries through the open door as she tends to the wounded, her commands mixing with prayers and comfort. Maria helps her, both women transformed by the day's events, healer and survivor, each finding strength and purpose, each understanding that some scars mark the path to salvation. Town's talking about rebuilding the clinic, Reynolds continues, watching Michael's reaction. Sheriff Wilson's already collecting donations, says a community needs both law and medicine, says it needs protectors of all kinds. And faith? Michael asks softly, one hand touching his collar as if ensuring it's still there, still real. Especially faith. The marshal places his hat back on with deliberate care. Though I reckon some might say having a guardian angel with a gun hand ain't exactly what the good book meant. Then again, maybe that's exactly what this territory needs. Men who understand both sin and salvation. Michael rises, wounds stiff but healing, like his soul. Planning to stay, Marshal? No need. Reynolds offers his hand, lawman to priest, past to present, a bridge across years of pursuit and change. Reckon Redemption Springs is in good hands, both kinds. As the marshal leaves, the setting sun paints the church in shades of gold and crimson, nature's own stained glass. Michael touches his collar, feeling the weight of both burden and blessing. The peacemaker rests in its hidden compartment beneath the altar, cleaned and oiled, not forgotten, but transformed, like its owner, into an instrument of higher purpose. The evening bell tolls, calling the faithful to prayer. They come in ones and twos, townspeople who witnessed both miracle and murder today, ranch hands with guns still strapped to their hips, even some of Reynolds's deputies seeking something beyond law's rigid boundaries. They fill the pews, seeking not just absolution, but the presence of a man who walks between worlds, who understands both the weight of sin and the feather touch of grace. Michael rises to begin the service, his voice carrying strength and humility in equal measure. Let us pray for those who died today, for those who lived, for justice and mercy, for vengeance and forgiveness, for the ghost that haunts every soul, and the redemption that beckons like dawn. The congregation bows their heads, but many eyes stay fixed on their priest, the shepherd who became a wolf to protect his flock, the killer who found grace without forgetting his skills, the man who proves that sometimes the path to heaven leads through darker territories. Outside, desert wind carries the hymn across Redemption Springs. The town rebuilds, its spirit stronger for being tested. The clinic will rise again, its walls marked by both bullets and blessing. The saloon returns to life, though the stories told there now carry more weight, more wonder. Speaking of a day when ghost and priest became one, when heaven's justice wore a gunfighter's face, and in the church a ghost finds rest at last, understanding that some weapons serve God's purpose, and some sins lead to higher ground. Father Michael Sullivan lifts the host, his hand steady as a gunfighter's, gentle as a priest's, offering communion to a congregation that knows the full measure of both justice and mercy. The ghost of Wyoming rides no more, but his legend grows richer, not of a killer who found religion, but of a man who learned to use both gun and gospel in service of something greater. In Redemption Springs, they say God works in mysterious ways, sometimes through prayer, sometimes through powder smoke, but always through those willing to bear both cross and gun in defense of the innocent. And if you listen, on quiet evenings when the desert wind blows just right, you might hear both psalm and pistol shot echoing across the years. Testament to a truth as old as sin itself, that redemption comes not from running from our shadows, but from teaching them to serve the light. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.